Welcome back, everybody. Week 3 of the NFL season. Welcome back into the AMA, the DLF and 4for4 AMA. I am Addison Hayes, joined as always by the amazing John Paulsen. John, how's it going? How'd the past week treat you? How'd Thursday night treat you?
You actually sound like a host there, Addison. I
Doing my
applaud
best.
you. You didn't just come in and say, "Hey, everything's good." I mean, we're in week 3. I mentioned on the yesterday's pod with Daigle that it feels like week 6, given everything that's happening. And he did reply with, "Well, I still have lots of questions about these offenses, so it does feel like still like week 3," which I think that's a measured approach with what we're dealing with in the last couple of weeks so far.
Right, absolutely. We still have 16 more weeks of the season. And there's so much football left to be played that we could be looking back in 3 months and being like, hey, do you remember Puka Nacua had like those 2 games and then it just like died? Now I'm not going to say that's actually going to happen, but it's crazy stuff like that does happen. Like this could just be a 2-week blip for some people, and man. But yeah, so we got week 3. We already got some questions rolling in here. Before we get started, I do just want to, we didn't really like come off the top and say this the past couple of weeks. But if you ask a question, because we're simultaneously streaming to DLF and 4for4, if you need to clarify if it's Dynasty or not, please clarify if it's Dynasty or redraft. And then if it's a StartSit question specifically, if you could indicate what the scoring system is, just PPR, half PPR, non-PPR, that greatly helps us giving you the most informed decision that we possibly can. So just wanted to clarify those 2 things. And of course, if you decide to throw out a super chat, we appreciate the support. We get right to those questions immediately as well. So if we're not answering your question as quickly as you would like, but would like the question answered, you could throw a super chat and we will get to it almost immediately. So with that, this wasn't any part of what I just said, but they just asked that question a little earlier this morning. But Drake London or Jacoby Myers? Jacoby with a Y. I don't know if this is a start sit, this is a trade. I'm assuming it's a start sit.
I would assume it's, I mean, if without any context, I would assume it's a start sit. We have no scoring system to go off of. I think Jacoby gets a little bit of a bump with PPR. He tends to. And Drake London is, from a volume standpoint, is a little hit or miss.
Right.
Goose egg in week 1, came back strong week 2. We just don't know what's going to happen with Arthur Smith and this passing attack. I do have London a few spots higher. I don't know how much Jacoby, like right now. I mean, he's coming off a concussion, so it's very much he's cleared to play. He's good to go.
Right.
He's not. It's not like he's playing with a hamstring or something. So I don't know how much more he'd move up. He's at 36.5 PPR. I've got Drake London at 32. I like the Detroit game. It's setting up well. The high scoring game, I think, with Atlanta or a potential for high scoring game with Atlanta and Detroit. I think Detroit's going to put the points up. Mm-hmm. So Atlanta will have to throw some, and London did well last week. So that's who I would probably go with, versus a Pittsburgh matchup for Myers. We don't know if that was a 1-week blip for Myers. He did look good with Jimmy Garoppolo. But obviously Davante Adams is the likely number 1 target on a weekly basis, even though Myers played well in week 1.
Right. I've been kind of, I mean, it's hard. I feel like it's hard to plug in Drake London because we saw 2 sides of the extremes, like you just said. But I trust him a little bit more than I do Jacoby Myers, just because Myers up until week 1, and that could have just been a Denver thing, like Surtain was locking down Davante Adams. So then Jacoby just got everything else. That could just be this one's really, really hard, but I think I would still trust in Drake London, especially like you said, with the high scoring matchup against Detroit. They should have to throw a little bit more, whereas Vegas and my Pittsburgh Steelers, that over under should be set at like 20. So
yeah, both I just want to mention both players have good matchups. Drake London likely faces off with Jerry Jacobs, who's given up a lot of fantasy points per route run, and Myers likely to match up with Patrick Peterson, who hasn't been great or anything this year either. So both players have good matchups.
Doc Oki's in the chat. He says Maui Brewing Company shirt. Love the brewery.
Yeah.
We stay there every few years.
Yeah, normally I've got the 4for4 gear on, but I thought we'd go with some solidarity there with the folks in West Maui. It's a great brewery, and thinking about them as they rebuild their city there in Lahaina.
I love it. Let's see. We got Wowzers is asking in a PPR to pick one. I'm assuming pick one start sit this week. James Cook, Raheem Mostert. I'm going to assume that's Brian Robinson and DeAndre Swift. So we got a casting crew of 4 running backs here that I feel like all kind of have a bid for a reason to be started this week. I think I'm going to throw Brian Robinson out of the equation. They play Buffalo. And I feel like just because of the matchup, that kind of is a tiebreaker for me between all 4 of these guys. And vice versa. James Cook then plays Washington. He's got solid usage. Mostert has solid usage as well, too. Don't know if we want to go back to the DeAndre Swift bank or not. That could be hit or miss. I think James Cook is my answer for this one, just given the volume and the receiving upside that he kind of has. But I don't know how you feel.
I appreciate you answering that question as I looked at my rankings and got my thoughts together. We're going to try to do that so that I can actually pull up my rankings. And I have Mostert highest, so I have Mostert at 9.
9.
Obviously, yeah, I have him at 9. I mean, you look at the running back landscape this week, it's pretty rough outside the first 7 or 8 players in terms of expected workload. I mean, you could certainly make a case for Jahmyr Gibbs, Ramondre Stevenson over him, maybe even Kyren Williams. But, Mostert had the huge game last week. Figures to see another big week workload this week. Denver's defense hasn't been very good this year. So, I think he's the play. I think you could make a case for Swift if Gainwell sits. I mean, he's got the rib injury, but was back at practice. So I'm kind of expecting Gainwell to play. Right now, I've left him out of the rankings for now. I usually make these changes on Friday afternoon when we get the final injury designations for a lot of these players.
Right.
If Gainwell's out, then Swift is pretty tempting, although the Bucks have a pretty good rush defense.
Right.
Cook I have at 16 in PPR, and then Robinson at 19. And Robinson is, like, just to comment on him, he's not a great PPR guy, but he's been running more routes, catching some more passes. It's a bad matchup against Buffalo, though. I think if he had the matchup that maybe Mostert or one of these other guys has, he'd be up higher in the rankings.
Right. That's how I basically viewed it with B-Rob. Is the matchup is just kind of taking him out. I think all these guys could be very similar workload wise at the end of the day. So the matchup just kind of negates Brian Robinson. I like Cook. I do like Raheem Mostert. I don't know why. I just haven't been.
Well, he's tough to trust.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this week though is it looks like Ahmed's going to be out, so you just have those few little handful of touches. I just think he's got a high touch floor. In that offense with both Wilson and Ahmed out,
plus goal line opportunities that James Cook probably doesn't have. So
for sure,
you have that as well too. All right, we kind of you talked me into Raheem Mostert. We got there. Let's see. Yam Baggy is asking. This is a dynasty question, so we're getting into dynasty. He was offered Ramondre Stevenson and Jahan Dotson for Jordan Addison in a 2025 first. He has a third is the only 24 pick he has. He has all picks in 2025. 12 team PPR, 1 quarterback. Oh, start 13. Holy crap. And then those are his running backs and wide receivers. So the way I would look at this is I like Addison over Dotson. I feel like that's pretty clear. But I would still take Stevenson over the 25 first. And I think that that's kind of what ultimately is leading me toward taking Ramondre and Jahan Dotson. Like, you're losing a little bit going from Addison to Dotson, but I don't think you're losing a ton production-wise this year. But Addison, of course, has more of the longevity for Dynasty that we like more and a better offense. Hopefully Kirk Cousins stays or they have a better option there next year if he doesn't. But I would take Ramondre over 25 first, and I think that's where the primary value is coming from for me to choose Ramondre and Dotson. I don't know if you have any input for Dynasty.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because Dotson's only 1 year older. I was just pulling up DLF's.
I think he's 2 years older because he was a 4th year prospect, came out a year earlier than Addison. So I think that makes him 2 years older.
Yeah, one thing I've learned.
Addison's 21.
One thing that I've learned in my PPR keeper league is that young receivers are gold. So if you can get young, good stud receivers and just lock them into your lineup for about 10 years, you're in good shape. Addison's, I mean, I think Dotson is just kind of off to a slow start, which was surprising because McLaurin, had the toe injury in week 1. Daigle did bring up a good point yesterday that maybe the Bieniemy target tree is a little too KC-ish, where they're just spreading the ball around instead of
maybe
featuring McLaurin, Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, and kind of a 3-headed tree, because they are. Howell is spreading the ball around.
The tight ends are getting a massive target share as well.
Logan Thomas as well, yeah.
Yeah, and John Bates saw 5 targets after Logan Thomas got hurt last week. So, I mean,
yeah, that's not ideal for Dotson. I think Dotson, talent-wise, Dotson is there with Addison in terms of his route running, but I think Addison's situation is better. And I don't know about the 25 first versus Stevenson. Stevenson seems like a good young running back to have.
Yep, that's why I take Stevenson over the first and take the hit from going from Addison to Dotson. But yeah, I made that exact same argument actually all offseason when we were talking about Jordan Addison at prospect. I said that he really isn't all that dissimilar from Jahan Dotson as a prospect. And both are kind of in similar-ish situations, of course, though Addison being in a better offense, but Stevenson and Dotson for me. So we're back to a start sit here. We got to start 2 of these guys between Jalen Warren, Breece Hall, and Jerry Jeudy in a PPR league. So Jalen Warren, Breece Hall, Jerry Jeudy of the I'm assuming we just have flexes to where it doesn't really matter with the running backs and then Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver. So I'll play Jerry Jeudy. I think he's one of them. And then I'll also play Breece Hall as kind of not necessarily a bounce back performance. We knew that he was going to not really do well against Dallas, but hopefully this week, then Hall, I think, should have a better opportunity to not only see more touches, but be more efficient with those touches. Then I'll take Jerry Jeudy just for the target floor, I guess, over Jalen Warren.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I'm fairly down on Jeudy this week. Tough matchup with the Dolphins secondary, but I got to check those injuries. I know there's one of the corners was not practicing. So I would lean right now Hall and Warren. And I wonder what you think about Breece Hall like next 3 weeks. I mean, he had a great week 1 just because he was so explosive against Buffalo, and then didn't do anything against another good defense. And then they've got a pretty good defense this week in New England again. So just kind of the short-term prospects for Hall are a little dicey, although, looking forward, he's got KC, Denver, Philly coming up. So getting a little bit better.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be hard just because, we talked about this last week after the whole Aaron Rodgers thing, where we view Breece Hall as the best, or at least the second best player on this offense. So if the Jets want to win and they're talking about Aaron Rodgers coming back like in the playoffs, they need to get there. And in order to get there, they got to win. And in order to win, they got to get the ball to Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. And those are really the only 2 options. So as long as his touch floor continues to rise, I think, then I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, he went from 11 in week 1 to 4 in week 2, but the running game was not going at all.
So right. It's Dallas.
Abandon it. Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to see the target volume come back up. That would be nice to kind of where it was as it was climbing up last year before he got hurt too. Wasn't really expecting Michael Carter to be utilized as much, but
I do think, of this group, Warren is a sneaky start just due to the matchup against Vegas. And he has basically been in a touch split with Najee Harris. And he's also been, and this is also PPR, so he's been better in the passing game as well. So I do kind of like him. So I would go Hall and Warren, but I would keep an eye on the rankings because, Jeudy might rise if there's some injuries there to the secondary in Miami.
Joe, 10-team Dynasty, just made the following trade. Got Chase Godwin, gave up Kelsey, 2 firsts, and Isaiah Hodgins. Oh, man. So it's a 10 team, but it's one quarterback. So it kind of negates the negates the value changes for the firsts going from 10 team to then one quarterback. I think, man, this is a weird trade. I think I'll take Chase. Just give me the second best asset in one quarterback dynasty, and that's it. And you got Chris Godwin coming back, so I'll take Chase and Godwin, and then hopefully those firsts are late. If they're yours, then you produce. Then the firsts are late, and it looks better in 2 years.
And then Hodgins had one target last night. I think he ran the second most routes after Slayton. But
I think that target should have been a touchdown.
Was it? I didn't watch the game.
I think if I remember, that one target should have been a touchdown.
He does get red zone targets. He was good late last year, and then had a touchdown last week. But I'm a little worried about Isaiah Hodgins' role in this offense.
Team Slayton all offseason.
Yeah, that's right. You said that. You said that last week, 2 weeks ago.
Robert's saying that he's a contending team, but he just lost Nick Chubb. As I'm sure a lot of contenders out there are in the same boat. He has Stevenson, Pierce, and David Montgomery. So he's losing out on Monty as well, too, for maybe a couple weeks. So his thoughts on sending a projected late first for James Cook. I would actually do this. I know typically I don't really like sending away future assets for running backs, especially whenever you're trying to compete or stay competitive, but I would have sent a late first for James Cook prior to the season, and I still will now because I feel like I've actually gained a little bit more confidence because of his usage over the first couple of weeks as his role in this Bills offense. We weren't really sure before the season. I was still willing to make this move before the season, though, but after 2 weeks of seeing his usage, seeing the receiving volume that he's also gotten with 4 or 5 targets a week, or 6 the 1 week, I think, if I remember correctly, I'm more confident in doing this. So I would send away the first for James Cook. Do you like James Cook? Are you in on him for rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the caveat that he's just not going to score many touchdowns. I mean, it would be great if he can get to 6, that would be great. But I mean, the usage is great. 37 touches out of the 59 in the backfield so far, 169 yards rushing. So I mean, 29 carries, 169 yards, and he's got the 8 catches for 53 on top of it. Yeah, I mean, I think certainly PPR makes him more valuable than a half PPR standard format due to the lack of touchdowns. I mean, I think he'll score a few, but he's not going to get any work inside the 10. It doesn't appear.
Right. The only other thing I would say is if you didn't want to send away the first, if you have like a second or some things like that, if you could go for James Conner, might be cheaper. Maybe you go for Jaylen Warren as he continues maybe to potentially take over this backfield or at least be the 1A. He'll be cheaper. Could not as productive as James Cook maybe. Oh, maybe he could. But cheaper, so it'd be nice. Maybe you can buy low on Aaron Jones as well with the injury.
Yeah, the nice thing about Cook, even though you said you don't usually like to trade away firsts for running backs, is that he is 23, so at least he's a young running back.
Right. I just wonder if there's other alternatives where you can get a running back cheaper who's going to give you 80% James Cook or even potentially the same as James Cook, and then you have your first later on that you can use next year, and it keeps you as competitive as you are. Maybe go for like Gus Edwards for a couple thirds or something. I don't know. Options, but I would I would ultimately do this then at the end of the day. So we got a couple super chats in here. Here for the Memes is back with it. $4.99 from Here for the Memes. Thank you for the $5 super chat. And thank you for joining us every single week, man. We really appreciate it. So he said that he pulled the trigger. Another dynasty trade. He traded away Stephon Diggs for Garrett Wilson in a second in his 10-man start 3 wide receiver PPR dynasty league. He wanted to get that young stud. I think this is absolutely a phenomenal move. Not only just because of like you're trading away Stephon Diggs to Garrett Wilson. So you got younger in a dynasty perspective to be able to do that. But then you also got a second on top of Garrett Wilson. Somebody was willing to add that second to an underperforming young stud to stay competitive. And at the end of the day, Diggs and Garrett Wilson's points per game difference may not matter all that much to where that trade was actually worth it for them. This was actually something that I talk about a lot over the past couple of years, very much so recently, because of Garrett Wilson, to where that point per game difference may not matter a whole ton. But you took advantage of it and you traded away someone who's about to be 30 for a 23-year-old, 22-year-old, and a second round pick. So I love this deal. This is phenomenal. Exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, this is fascinating because you're actively making your 20. Like, this is the thing that's intriguing about Dynasty is that you're making your 2023 team worse because you're going to make your 2024, 2025, whatever, down the line better. And so there's just teams like that are contending, and there's teams in the league that are just not contending. I find this fascinating. Like the whole year, you're just running out your lineup. You're not expecting to win in many games, and you're just getting ready for, 2 or 3 years down the line.
The championship for a lot of those rebuilding teams is, like the championship for them this past year was Bijan Robinson. So that to them is their trophy at the end of the year rather than an actual championship.
Got it.
It makes Dynasty fun for sure. But like I said, this might not actually end up changing your end of season ranking or standings all that much, going from Diggs to Garrett Wilson. You like mentally you think it does because you're like, oh, Stephon Diggs, dude's gonna score like 15 plus fantasy points every week. But I mean, all it takes is Garrett Wilson to take a 60-yard pass to the house, and he's right there too, relying on the talent a little bit more. Even though he only has 2 receptions on 8 targets, but it is what it is. All right, we got a couple more super chats in here. I don't know what order these came in because they all just come up on the side here, but we're going to go through all 3 of these. So just bear with us here for a second. I'm just going to go from top to bottom. Samson in a PPR is asking which one of these guys does he flex this week, Josh Reynolds or Roschon Johnson? PPR format. Now, Josh Reynolds, I will take a bow and say that I kind of called him being fantastic last week. I dropped that on Sunday, saying that he was going to be a top 20 player. And he actually was top 12, I think.
Yeah, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, so I actually undersold how good Josh Reynolds was going to be last week against Seattle. But Roschon is a good running back as well, too, in the Chicago Bears offense. He's, I think, slowly climbing the ladder a little bit. Deontay Foreman, of course, was a healthy scratch last week. And he's starting to cut into Khalil Herbert's workload a little bit, too. But I don't know if he's exactly there yet to where you want to trust him over a guy like Josh Reynolds, who is the wide receiver 2 in Detroit's offense, high-powered offense, could potentially be more of the one with Amon-Ra dealing with this. It's like a turf toe kind of injury or something like that. So he might be in line for a little bit more opportunity here. I'm taking Josh Reynolds. And I'm hoping that's the same direction you're going.
Yeah, I am. And this is actually a week where I would start Roschon Johnson over Khalil Herbert due to his role in the passing game and the likelihood. I mean, the Bears are likely to trail in just about every game, but they're very likely to trail against the Chiefs. And that would, mean the more dump offs and routes run. And he's a better pass protector than Herbert, although Herbert's improved in that area. Reynolds, I think the case is pretty clear. He's done really well the first 2 weeks. And then, in a home game against Atlanta, Jared Goff has 27 passing touchdowns in his last 10 home games. Just has played really well at home in Detroit. I mean, if you're projecting him for another 2+ touchdowns, there's a pretty good chance that Reynolds will score. And Amon-Ra St. Brown has the toe injury. It looks like he's going to play, but he may not be 100%. That might push a couple targets Reynolds' way as well.
Josh Reynolds. There you go, Samson. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the support. Matt's asking with another super chat and a half PPR to flex Elijah Moore, Kendre Miller. It looks like he's already starting Bijan, Gibbs, Ridley, and Chris Godwin. So he just needs the flex decision between Elijah Moore and Kendre Miller. Man, I think I still stick with Elijah Moore. It's been rough watching Deshaun Watson. He is not coming back to Houston Texans Deshaun Watson form. But I don't know if I trust Kendre Miller the first week back. And this is his first real game too, as a rookie. So
Yeah.
Yeah. You've said this the past couple of weeks. Running backs usually get the nod a little bit just because of the touch volume floor. But I don't know what that is for Kendrick Miller yet. So I think I'm going back to Elijah Moore, but I don't really like it.
Yeah, normally this is a decision between an Elijah Moore and somebody who's the starter, the clear starter for their team, but maybe not an impressive running back starter, where you can be pretty sure that they're going to get 12 plus touches and you get that floor. But in this situation, we don't know what Kendrick Miller is going to. I think he's got a really low floor and a ceiling if they decide to be. It'd be pretty crazy, but I mean, I guess not crazy for the Saints. If they know that Miller is better than Tony Jones, they might just roll out Miller and as the starter, and he ends up with a big game. But we have no idea. He might only get 3 touches. So the thing that's kind of tilting me towards Elijah Moore, and he is significantly higher in the rankings, is this matchup against Tennessee. This is the put up or shut up game right now for Deshaun Watson in 2023. I mean, you can't run on Tennessee. They shouldn't even bother. They lost Nick Chubb. Maybe 15 carries at the most would be wise. And to just drop back and throw the ball against this really sketchy Titans secondary, who was bad last year. They're bad this year. You could throw on them. So I'm taking like the overs on Watson as much as I don't like him. He's like, his over under is like 230. And I feel like if he gets 230, 250, Elijah Moore is going to deliver. And that's the way to, win this game, is to go and just throw the ball on Tennessee. So we'll see.
Right. Exactly. It's so funny that people literally saw what happened with Joshua Kelly last week and they're like, you know what? I'm okay starting Jerome Ford. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, he could get there as a receiver for it, but I mean, I have him ranked as a low end RB2. He came in and did a nice job with Chubb coming out, but I mean, this is a terrible matchup against Tennessee. It's just, don't start your guys against Tennessee if you can avoid it.
No. Oh, I can't wait. He's going to score like 7 fantasy points this week, and then I'm just going to tweet out like, are we done with these like backup running backs against Tennessee? Like, I don't even feel comfortable like if like Bijan Robinson faced Tennessee. Like
what if Derrick Henry faced Tennessee? I mean, would we start him? I don't even know if we'd start him.
I don't know. We'll have to see I don't know what they look like in practice.
It'd be like 20 for 70 and a touchdown. That's the line.
Maybe that's why they're so good, because they're practicing against Derrick Henry. So nobody's as good as Derrick Henry in the running game.
They have to tackle him.
So everybody else is just easy. It's like when you're warming up to go at bat with baseball, you swing 2 bats, and then swing 1 sounds easy. That's a terrible analogy. Elijah Moore. Matt,
Elijah.
Thank you for the support. Tyler with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Tyler. He's asking, start Goff or Love at quarterback, and then Pittman or Josh Reynolds at wide receiver. He didn't give a scoring system here. I'm not sure if that necessarily matters. There's a part of me that really wants to say just do the Goff Reynolds stack. Would be really, really fun. But is that actually the way I'm going to go? I think I start Goff over Jordan Love this week. And I think I will play Reynolds as well and not mess around with Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, I would agree with the Goff call. I have him at 9. I have Love at like 17. The matchup's better, and he's at home. I mentioned the 27 touchdowns in his last 10 games. Just start Jared Goff at home until he has a bad game. As for Pittman, Reynolds, I would go Pittman, because I think that the Gardner Minshew start is actually a boost for him due to the pass volume.
Sure.
And just, I mean, it remains to be seen whether or not Anthony Richardson ends up being a better passer than Gardner Minshew, but Minshew has delivered in his opportunities, and he's even in the last few years, he's played well for Shane Steichen in Philly as the backup there for Hurts, and I think he comes in and has a good game against Baltimore. And I think Pittman, I mean, he had 10 targets in 3 quarters from Gardner Minshew. They didn't go for much yardage, but I mean, he's looking Pittman's way. So I think, the volume is going to be there for him. They're not going to be able to run the ball well on Baltimore.
Right. I was just about to add, Moss is probably not going to be all that effective this week, so don't need to throw.
And Baltimore should put up points, so this could be like a 40, pass attempt game for Gardner Minshew.
I love it. that was the way that I was leaning, but my heart really wanted to say the Goff Reynolds stack.
Stacks are fun. I mean, and you might regret it too. Like, I mean, Reynolds could get there again and have a couple touchdowns. I mean, it wouldn't be shocking.
Is there something? Can we add maybe an asterisk on Pittman and say that if you're kind of not favored, and you kind of need a boom week, do you go for the Goff Reynolds stack to kind of double the chances of you being right with Jared Goff? And Josh Reynolds definitely has a higher ceiling than Pittman, even though Pittman has maybe a higher target floor. Like you said, like if they're just dink and dunks, like his end of game stat is like 8 for 60, but Reynolds could have 14 PPR points on 2 plays, you know?
Yeah, definitely with the stack, you are raising your ceiling. You're also lowering your floor, but
yeah,
we like to talk about the raising of the ceiling.
Yeah. So maybe if you're really not favored and you kind of need some help, maybe Reynolds is the better answer. But Pittman's probably the better option for floor. Here for the memes back again. What's your 2023 outlook for Brian Robinson, as well as his dynasty outlook, in your opinion? He took him last year, traded Damien Pierce for 2.03. Wow. So you're obviously winning with Brian Robinson over Damien Pierce right now. Rest of season for Brian Robinson, I mean, he's looking like the workhorse. Antonio Gibson has like 6 touches in 2 games, and Robinson has outproduced Gibson in the receiving game as well. They have like similar stats, but similar receiving numbers in terms of receptions, but Robinson's done a little bit more and has scored a touchdown on that as well. So, I mean, I really like Brian Robinson. He's kind of come out as a workhorse running back, and I think that he's going to be really, really good for the rest of the season. You're just going to have to kind of pick and choose your weeks to kind of sit him at, like this week, for example, against Buffalo. But I think in the majority of games, he's going to be fantastic. And for Dynasty, whenever we were talking about trading away a first for James Cook, Brian Robinson kind of came up in my head as maybe you could buy low on Brian Robinson still, that he might be cheaper than a first, but I'm not necessarily sure if that's the case anymore, given what he's done the past 2 weeks. Brian Robinson has certainly risen up my dynasty rankings as well, and I like him a lot rest of season. How do you view B-Rob?
Definitely has ascended in the first 2 games due to this workload. I mean, he's got 40 touches, but he was, I remember, analyzing him in the preseason and writing about him as like, he was like the last sort of high touch running back floor type guy that you could get. And he was going in like the 7th, 8th round at the time. Cause I think people still think that Antonio Gibson's going to come for his job, but Robinson down the stretch last year was averaging like 18.3 carries, I think, over a stretch late last year.
Right. Not a lot of targets though. I think that was
that was the concern. But now he's getting targets. He caught the touchdown on a nice little Sam Howell rollout in week 1. So the fact that he's on the field for these passing downs is good. Gibson had the fumble in week 1, and basically they benched him and went to Chris Rodriguez as the backup. So the other thing I like to look at is yards after contact per attempt and broken tackles per attempt. And Robinson is doing pretty well in both metrics. It's early, but through 2 games, he's 13th yards after contact per attempt, and he's 17th. And this is out of 38 eligible running backs. He's 17th in broken tackles per attempt. So he's getting it done. And this is an offense that I think people were sleeping on, all off season, just because they weren't sure if Sam Howell's any good. But you've got Bieniemy in there. Howell's delivering passes. It looks pretty good. The offensive line isn't bad. So Robinson's going to have his, share of goal line carries as well. And he seems like, they certainly trust him the most down in the goal line with Gibson's fumbling issue in week 1.
Yep. If you want a barometer for where I kind of value Brian Robinson in terms of running back rankings, in September ADP, Damien Pierce was RB20, and I have Brian Robinson over Damien Pierce in Dynasty. So if that means that Brian Robinson's a back end RB2 in Dynasty, then so be it. He's definitely risen up from where he was at in the 30s, early 30s in Dynasty.
Yeah, I'm looking at the DLF rankings. He's RB35. I would, I might have to get a conference call going on with those guys over there and see if they need to bump him up. But he's 24, so I guess that's pretty good for a running back. But he's behind James Conner and Dalvin Cook and there's some, Cam Akers, who's also 24. I mean, I think I'd rather have Brian Robinson at this point.
Yeah, I'd rather have Brian Robinson than Akers. Madison, Damien Pierce. I'd probably take Robinson over Charbonnet at this point, just for the production. Definitely over Connor, over Monty, over Khalil Herbert, and Roschon.
Damien Pierce is an interesting one because I think he's better runner, but his tackle breaking and his yards after contact per attempt are just not there this year. And that offensive line is so bad. So how quickly can they turn that around in Houston?
Not this year. I don't think. I don't think. Albert's got a start sit question in a full PPR. George Pickens or Nico Collins? How is this not Nico Collins?
Oh, interesting. I've got Pickens at half. That's half PPR. So
in a full PPR, the Nico has had a tremendous couple of weeks, and I don't know how it stops. We were just talking about the Texans and how bad their run game has been with Damien Pierce. Their offensive line is bad, but CJ Stroud is doing work back there, making the most of what he's been given. And Nico Collins has been the primary beneficiary of that. And if they're going to be losing every single week, Nico could be this year's like Amon-Ra St. Brown, essentially, just from targets alone.
Yeah, I mean, I have Pickens slightly higher. It's 13.4 to 11.9, so it's only a point and a half. You make an interesting case because they are both younger receivers. Neither one is terribly proven. But I'm kind of going off of the Pickens target share with Deontay out last week. He's got a good matchup against Vegas, but I mean, Collins does as well. The Jacksonville secondary is not great. Definitely agree that Stroud is better than Pickett right now. So,
yes.
Stroud's problem is that the offensive line is not great, but they can't run, and the defense is going to give up points. So you're looking at a lot of pass attempts for Stroud, and I've been talking about it all offseason, is that he was the one that really stood out accuracy wise over at reception perception, Derek Klassen's charting at all levels, really accurate. He wasn't top in all of them, but he was, top 2 or 3 of the rookie class in all of them, and all of his numbers, were kind of, green boxes. So like really bullish about Stroud's upside. I mean, I think I would rather have him than Bryce Young at this point. So it's just a matter. And then they've got Tank Dell and they've got Nico there. If they could just get the offensive line sorted, he's going to be good for a lot of years.
Yeah. Because I think this could be similar to the Pittman Reynolds kind of thing, where it's upside versus floor. But
yeah, I mean, Nico. I guess Nico had the huge game last week too. Like he just did it just as well as Pickens. And then he also had the 11 targets in week 1. He's got 20 targets so far. So I'm gonna have to revisit this ranking.
That's what I'm saying, dude. I was arguing with somebody on Twitter because I was saying that I would start Nico over Drake London and Garrett Wilson this week, and they're like, that's just like looking at box scores from week 2 and making your decision on week 3. I'm like, did you not see what he did in week 1? I was like, this isn't just a 1 week thing. This is 2 weeks in a row now for Nico Collins, and I don't know how it stops. Now, Pickens gets Vegas, and we saw what Gabe Davis just did last week, and maybe a kind of similar-ish role. So there's upside there for sure, but I don't know, man. I think people are sleeping on Nico, and he is much more of a legitimate start than people think.
I have him at 28, just below Addison, but he plays more than Addison. Godwin, who has yet to have a big game. Just to go back to draft, this is a great case for the strategy that I like to utilize in the middle rounds, is trying to find real world wide receiver ones that are going in those middle rounds, because if you are able to hit on your running backs early and you can grab these guys 5th through 10th, like he was going in the 10th round.
Yeah. And
maybe was one of, if not the last real world wide receiver 1, if that makes sense. Like,
Yep.
because you're getting so many targets that late, and then we also knew that Stroud was probably going to be good. So that's why like Nico really jumped out as a breakout candidate this year.
Nico. Bill's asking Jerome Ford or Elijah Moore this week in a PPR. And we kind of hinted at maybe not liking Jerome Ford this week given the Tennessee Titans matchup, but we also talked about not really liking Elijah Moore. So this is a pretty tough decision, I think. And I'm not necessarily sure which way to go. I feel like you just go Jerome Ford because, I mean, it is PPR, so maybe he delivers a little bit in terms of the receiving game and just a hope that he does something with the 12 to 15 carries that he'll probably also get before Kareem Hunt has any real involvement in this offense. So I think I'd go with Jerome Ford for the touches, but I don't like it.
It's ugly. Definitely from a matchup standpoint, Elijah Moore has the better matchup, but this is one of those cases where we're talking about a running back who's ranked, I think, 24th versus Roshan. That was the other StartSit question earlier where he was ranked 35. So this is where you get the touch floor from the running backs because you're expecting, I'm expecting 14 carries, 47 yards. So not very productive, but maybe a half touchdown for Ford, which might be a little bit optimistic on the running game, but he should get 3 catches or so, 20 yards. And I got him for 1/10 of a touchdown as a receiver. So he's going to play a lot. They should throw a lot, and he can turn some catches into fantasy points. And I don't know how quickly they just install Kareem Hunt as the pass catching back, if they do it all. I don't think they do it the first week he's back.
Right. There's less of an adjustment, I think, because he's been in this offense before. Yeah. Like just less than a year ago. But yeah, how quickly do they? And they've been pretty adamant this whole entire week that Jerome Ford is their guy. Right. But this is kind of a good segue. David's asking, should we worry about Ford with the signing of Kareem Hunt? I'm not necessarily all that worried. But
I would have preferred they not sign. If I was a Ford manager, I would prefer they not sign Hunt, but I'm not like, this guy's not falling. I mean, they picked Ford over Hunt this offseason when they let Hunt walk.
Well, no, John, that was because of money. That's what everybody on Twitter told me. It was because of money.
Well, yeah, I mean, Hunt wanted a deal, but I mean, it might have been partially because of money, but Hunt, they let Hunt sit out there for months, and it wasn't until the Chubb injury that they went out and re-signed him. So, no, I think Ford's a starter, and you're going to see Hunt. You might see Hunt in the kind of annoying 8 to 12 touch role that he had when Chubb was there. I mean, that certainly is a possibility, but I don't think you have a situation where Ford's like going to the bench unless he really stinks it up or starts fumbling the ball or something.
Right. I would say I think I'd be more worried if the Browns had signed Fournette than Kareem Hunt. So I don't think Kareem Hunt's all that good. He averaged like 4 yards per touch last year. But yeah, no, I'm not all that concerned. I think you do have a few weeks at least to figure out if you should be worried or not. And kind of similarly related Jerome Ford questions. Joe has to sit one of these guys this week in a PPR league. I'm assuming that's Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, and Jerome Ford. And I'm assuming that the sit is Jerome Ford.
Easy. That's a pretty easy call given the terrible, terrible matchup against Tennessee. It's a volume play, but your other 3 starts are so much better. So yeah. It's an easy call.
I agree. And then one more Elijah Moore question. Jamie's asking in a PPR league to start Elijah Moore or Christian Kirk. And I feel like this is Christian Kirk as well. And he even notes that if Zay Jones is out, Kirk gets a bump as well.
I think it's Kirk even with Zay Jones playing, given the game that Kirk had last week and Zay Jones being kind of dinged up. And if he's out, certainly Kirk's going to see an increase, I think, in his snaps.
Nice. Deesh in a half PPR needs to flex DJ Moore, Joshua Kelly, Jahan Dotson, or DeAndre Swift. So we got another question, a multitude of guys that all have a vie for this spot. And I'm trying to decipher this in my head. I don't know if you pulled up your rankings quickly enough.
I'm pulling them up. When I see these questions, I have my gut like, oh, probably Kelly.
I went straight to Kelly as well. I think I'm ready to go back to Kelly. I was telling everybody to sit him last week, but this week he has actually a really good matchup. My only caveat I think to not having Kelly would be if Kenneth Gainwell's out, to where I would then play DeAndre Swift.
I was going to say that. So I have Swift ahead of Kelly right now, but that's because Gainwell's not in the rankings. I'm assuming I'm probably going to end up putting him in today, and that's going to drop Swift down. We just don't know what his touch floor is going to be with Gainwell healthy. So Kelly just has this matchup with Minnesota. They are kind of a run funnel right now, and that's what happened to them with Swift last week, where he had 170 yards rushing. Philly figured out that they were just going to play zone and invite the Eagles to run. So the Eagles started running, and Swift had a great game. So I think that probably the same game plan against the Chargers, and Kelly, bounces back and has a big game after a very quiet week 2.
Yep. Love Josh. I think Kelly's actually in my DraftKings lineup this week because he's still pretty cheap, especially after not doing anything really last week. So I liked him in DraftKings. Phoenix is asking, who should I start in his 2 flex spots? A whole bunch of guys here. Tutu, Roschon, Dotson, Burks, Tank Dell, Damien Pierce, or Zay Jones. Zay might not be in this conversation. He might be out. I think Tutu, man. Those Rams pass catchers just keep doing it. They play Monday night. Roschon, Dotson. I don't think I'm starting. I'm trying to eliminate guys that I wouldn't start off the rip. And I think I'm eliminating Zay Jones. I'm eliminating Burks. I think I'm still eliminating Tank Dell. And I'm probably eliminating Damien Pierce as well. So that leaves me Tutu, Roschon, and Jahan Dotson. And I think I'd play both wide receivers, Tutu and Dotson. You made a good case for Roschon, though. The fact that they play the Chiefs and has a little bit more receiving upside. But is it Tutu Dotson? Or are you going Roschon? You're going Roschon on one of these.
I am. No, I mean, I have Pierce ahead of those guys. I mean, I know it's been bad, but he's got that touch floor.
He doesn't have receiving upside, though.
He has a bit of receiving upside, not as much as we were hoping for this preseason. He's still the best threat to score a touchdown on the team. So I would go Pierce, and then it's between, Dotson and Roschon and Tutu, I think, for the second spot. And we don't know what scoring system this is. So
that's true.
Tutu gets a bump probably in PPR. But that's sort of like you're trying to galaxy brain that second, for me, the second flex spot. But I agree that Burks, I would say Burks, Tank Dell, and Zay Jones are, below this group.
Yeah.
So we can eliminate a few, but
half PPR, my bad. That was PPR. The next message.
Yeah, I mean, my next guy ranked is Dotson, but I get that. I mean, that's a bet on talent, given how, kind of the slow start that he's off to so far. I mean, if you want to go with the hot player, I think Tutu is probably the hottest player. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, certainly.
I mean, Buffalo, tough matchup for Dotson. Tutu's got Cincinnati.
Cincy.
And probably another week or 2 of this where he's getting, he had 8 targets in week 1, 9 in week 2. Probably not a big threat to score a touchdown, but he's a good bet for 5 for 70 or something, or 5 for 60.
Right. Yeah, he's been operating a little bit more as the deeper threat while Puka's been doing everything short to intermediate. We can split the difference when we go with Damien Pierce and Tutu Atwell. I think that could be our final consensus answer.
But yeah, it's interesting that you were like, Pierce, I'm just crossing him off. You're at that point with the Houston running game where you're just like, I don't want to start this guy.
Don't want it.
His tackle breaking his tackle breaking is not good this year so far, but I'm hoping that regresses.
And that offensive line, like 4 out of their 5 starters are all injured. Like it's not.
But they were terrible last year, and he was good. But he's just not breaking tackles at the same rate.
Well, he wasn't all that good last year. He only averaged like 12.5 points per game in PPR.
His advance, I meant his advance, like his yards after contact per attempt
right.
and his tackle breaking were really good.
They were good. But he's losing work as well, too. He's losing work to Mike Boone. And
yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't like Damien Pierce.
He's got 30 touches, 4 catches.
That's fine. He's averaging half a fantasy point per touch.
12.2 PPR points total. Not great.
Let's go down to Bo. This is a redraft trade, which I don't think we've really had to decipher one of these yet. So this is pretty fun. 12-team Superflex. He's 2-0 with his second highest points. Quarterbacks are Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence. Never mind, this is Dynasty. I kept rating. Traded his 24th second for Baker Mayfield and his 4th. Which I think that's phenomenal, the way that Baker's been playing. Do you think that Baker continues to do this? Is this legit?
Well, what is he? Let's talk about Baker for a minute. What has he done? I think he's got a good thing going with Mike Evans.
Yes.
We saw this coming in. Like we weren't sure, like heading in this summer is like, is he going to lose this job to Kyle Trask? Like that was the legit conversation. So he has 173-2 against Minnesota in week 1. He kind of got there with the 2 touchdowns, but 5.1 yards per attempt
right
against Minnesota. And then last week against Chicago, they might be the worst defense in the league. He had 317 and a touchdown, 9.3 yards per attempt. So on the year, his numbers look pretty good. He's got the thing Daigle noted last podcast. He had 7. He's averaging 7 carries. So he's scrambling, which I think raises his floor a little bit, even though he's only got 11 and 17 yards rushing. So I would say, is this going to continue? Philly is a pass funnel. He's got New Orleans week 4. We're not exactly sure what they are. He's got a bye in week 5. And then he's got Detroit and Atlanta in week 6 and 7. Buffalo week 8. Houston in week 9. Tennessee in week 10. So there's several good matchups coming up. It doesn't look like he's in any danger of losing the job. They're up by, they won both games. So yeah, I think this is he's a good third quarterback to have. And
he might be a 2 depending on how bad Daniel Jones is for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, you'd think. I mean, Jones had a good game against Arizona fantasy wise, but he's faced 2 of the worst matchups you could face with Dallas and 49. I mean, I think Daniel Jones gets it going here. But I see your point. There might be situations where you want to start Mayfield over Daniel Jones based on the
he's streamable with Daniel Jones for sure.
And then he's got the 2 really good receivers. I mean, we know Mike Evans is good. We know Godwin's good. If there's an injury to one of those 2 guys, they're in trouble. They don't have Russell Gage to fall back on, but if both those guys stay healthy, he's got good weapons.
Seth hit us with a $10 super chat. Seth, thank you so much, my man. All right, so he has Jonathan Taylor in a 12-team half PPR, 1 quarterback dynasty league, 10-team keeper. So not really dynasty, 10 keeper. Should I hold or sell Jonathan Taylor? If he should sell him, what is good value? He also has Javonte, Roshan, Tank, Olave. Is that Daniel Jones? Can't think of another DJ. Dotson, Watson.
DJ Moore.
Oh, that makes sense. Musgrave. So in 12-team half PBR, 1 quarterback, 10 keeper. Should you hold on to Jonathan Taylor or should you sell? How have you been approaching JT? If anybody's asked you, if they drafted him or stashed him on IR, what do you do with Jonathan Taylor? It's an interesting situation.
Well, I'm just looking. His receivers look pretty good. Olave, Christian Watson, DJ Moore, Dotson. He's got 2 young tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
Running backs are like pretty thin, right? Am I
right? Yes.
He's got Jonathan Taylor, Javonte Williams, Rashawn Johnson. So there's some upside there with those second, number 2, number 3. Okay, so I think the question is, what does Taylor come back as, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a dynasty league, so are you like trying to build for the future, or are you trying to win this year? I would think that Taylor comes back as the starter. It's in his best interest to have a good year, have his contract, roll, and for the next year, and then just go be a free agent if he can. We haven't heard a whole lot about his mindset or attitude with the team or relationship with the team. It was really ugly there for a few weeks, but maybe this is like a cooling off period and he comes back. We saw what Zach Moss did. I mean, Taylor's better than Zach Moss. So, given your roster, and if you're trying to win this year, I think I would just hold and use him as your RB1 because you've got a pretty strong receiver group. What do you think?
I pulled up the DLF trade analyzer just to look at what JT's going for within the context of like a full dynasty league with recent trades with people that have had him and been sticking with him. One of the interesting trades in here is Jonathan Taylor for Derrick Henry and Mike Evans. Now, of course, this is a 10 keeper league, so I'm sure some of the redraft aspect gets spilled over a little bit more than what this dynasty league would, where you're moving on from a soon to be like 30-year-old running back and 30-year-old wide receiver.
Yeah, that's like
Jonathan
a win now
Taylor.
move, right? That's a
right.
I want to win this year move.
Right. And so, I mean, I would trade Jonathan Taylor for Derrick Henry and Mike Evans in a 10 keeper format. I don't know if the other person would, but so
yeah, because I think, do we agree that Henry is better than Taylor this year?
Yes,
value wise,
yeah. Sure.
I mean, we just know what we're getting with Henry.
And Mike Evans could, I mean, based on we were just talking about it with Baker a little bit, that they have a good connection. He could be the wide receiver 2 on this team, depending on the upsides of DJ Moore and Jahan Dotson or what Christian Watson is when he comes back.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, Evans has been great so far.
We got, that's a bad deal. Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Hopkins for Saquon. That was done a few days ago. Probably to kind of get in with the Saquon injury. There's not a lot of Jonathan Taylor trades. Jonathan Taylor for Mark Andrews. Don't know if that's getting done.
I mean, I think people are drafted him thinking I want to start him when he comes back, so they're probably not moving him.
Right.
If it's redraft.
I think to give you some advice on what to do with Jonathan Taylor, I think I'm holding on to him unless you're really getting I wouldn't say like an elite running back coming back, but unless you're getting a quality option coming back to you that you can start now and then have that into your lineup, but then also is going to be comparable to Jonathan Taylor whenever he comes back in this Colts offense. Which
what about Taylor for like Ramondre?
I would love that. I think I don't think you're getting really anything higher than that, and I'm not sure how many running backs below Ramondre I'm really going to go. Like, I'm not trading JT for Najee,
or Mixon or
No.
Aaron. Probably not for Aaron Jones. Maybe Aaron Jones because he's got like a 2 or 3 year window for him, I think.
Yeah, he's just got to come back because I mean he looked great in week 1. Mixon would kind of be interesting too because he's getting the volume. He just hasn't scored. If he has 1 touchdown, he's a RB1 on the year.
Well, Burrow's injury kind of throws that whole offense into a tilt.
Yeah,
like it's wacky if he's not there.
Right. So that's why Mixon I think is interesting, but I think I would hold on to JT for him to come back in 2 weeks. But Ramondre I think is a fantastic example. I would probably do Aaron Jones. Derrick Henry I would do, but I don't think you're getting anybody really above that. Could you get Jacobs? Do you think you could buy low on Jacobs?
That's possible. He's had a really terrible start.
Yeah. Right. Like if you do like Jonathan Taylor and Roschon for Jacobs to give him a running back now. I don't know if you want to do that though, but
I don't know that Jacobs is necessarily has more value than Taylor once Taylor's back.
So would you do JT for Jacobs straight up? Would you take Jacobs?
I don't think I would.
Oh,
just given the way he started, Jacobs. So we're like
he
a week
started
or
like
two.
this last year though.
Was it this bad?
It was pretty bad. Yeah. Because I remember actually I was editing a video for 4 for 4 where Tara was talking about that Jacobs, they basically did this exact same thing last year.
Well, yeah, he had 10 for 57. One target, 19 for 69 in the second game. Then he went on and started going on a tear in week 4.
Yeah. But Jacobs is getting more receiving volume at the start of this year than he did at the start of last year. So there's that too. I think I'd take Jacobs.
And he said, Denver was that was last year. Now I'm back on Baker Mayfield, guys. Bear with me. Open with Denver this year, 19 for 48, 2 catches for 23. Buffalo, bad matchup. Yeah, Pittsburgh Clippers. Pittsburgh Chargers, Packers, Patriots, and the Bears. Oof. Yeah, you can get it going. I don't know. I think that I think talent-wise, Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor are pretty close. They're both have bad relationships with their team. Who's better this year? I guess at least Jacobs is playing, and we know what sort of workload he's going to get. Yeah, I guess.
Right. That's what leads me over to Jacobs. Hopefully that helped you out, Seth. Gave you a few options there. If you're not getting anything really like that, I would just hold and see what JT does whenever he comes back. Chuck also hit us with a super chat. Thank you, Chuck. He's asking if he should trade Mike Evans and Raheem Mostert for Jamar Chase. Imagine asking this question like 3 weeks ago. Dynasty, yes, absolutely. But I don't think this is a dynasty question. So redraft, I think this makes it, this is interesting in redraft because you just mentioned about Joe Burrow's injury kind of throws that whole Bengals offense for a loop.
Yeah.
Mike Evans has done well. Raheem Mostert, at least right now, is a workhorse. Oh boy.
I think in redraft I'm holding my guys. I do. My initial reaction was Mostert's he's going to turn into a pumpkin here when Jeff Wilson comes back. But Evans has been better than Chase, and that doesn't mean that he will be rest of the season. But if Burrow were healthy, I would go with Chase. But this calf thing could linger 3-4 weeks or more. And what are you getting from Chase with, what is it, Browning at quarterback?
Yeah, Jake Brown.
And he was wasn't he terrible in the preseason? Objectively bad. So
I think so.
I don't have a lot of confidence in the passing game if Burrow's not playing. So I think I would just stick with the hot hands right now with Evans and Mostert, and if it's redraft.
Oh my goodness. Because the opposite argument is, why not just take Jamar Chase? We know what the talent is. And if he continues to just see, 8 to 10 targets a game, hopefully that talent just kind of catches up. And then you have an extra roster spot that maybe you could pick up somebody else or do something else with. So just get the better guy in your starting lineup.
I think Mostert is like an RB. I think Mostert's like an RB1, RB2 for the next couple weeks, but when Jeff Wilson comes back, who knows what's going to happen there? And he's not been the most durable. But
sure,
I also would not be if Burrow's like a 4-week injury or something where he's either bad or out, then I would not be shocked if Evans outscores Chase this year.
Right.
Even rest of the season.
We're really saying
we do think about these. We do think about these super chats, don't we? We really kind of parse them through, huh?
Goodness. I think you keep Mike Evans and Raheem Mostert. Holy crap!
That's sacrilege, right? To say something like that with Jamar Chase on the other side. But if it's redraft, it makes some sense given the Burrow issue. I think if Burrow looks like he's going to play, or it's another week and that's it, then I probably would make the trade then. But it's hard to tell what's going on with that. Calf injuries are tricky.
Because I mean, if you said, should I trade Evans and Mostert for Garrett Wilson, you're saying keep Evans and Mostert over Garrett
in redraft for sure.
Right. At what point do we just apply similar logic to Jamar as we have with Garrett Wilson, or Drake London or anybody that mattered? These uber talented wide receivers that are just hindered by bad situations.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That is wild. All right, John, it is a little after 1 on here. Should we put out we'll give it a couple more minutes.
Last call for alcohol and super chats.
While we wait, we do have a question of Darren Waller. Wait. Where's the first one? Hold on, I'm going to find it. Where's this trade? This is fantastic. Live stream. I just saw the first part of this. Where was it? There's so many comments. You guys are awesome. And I say this every single week, but I think my favorite part about this show is that other people in the chat are just as knowledgeable as we are, and they answer questions as well. It's really fun to see that. I can't find this. Are you commenting?
I tried to comment. I was telling Jeff, good job, as you were struggling to find the original tweet or the original comment.
All right, we'll pivot over to this real quick as we do the last call. But Andrew's asking in a half PPR, would you start Zach Moss, Jerome Ford, or Garrett Wilson? This is another example of a question that sounded ridiculous 3 weeks ago, but it is already week 3, and these are the type of questions that we have to ask ourselves. Zach Moss gets Baltimore, Jerome Ford gets Tennessee, both absolutely terrible matchups. But do you trust Garrett Wilson with Zach Wilson?
So I know I have Zach Moss over Jerome Ford. Just because he's going to get every touch in that backfield. And then Garrett Wilson's ugh.
Garrett Wilson's stat line last week, if he did not have that touchdown, was 1 catch for 15 yards.
He's got the 2 touchdowns in 2 games. How is this sustainable for him?
On straight talent. Those 2 touchdowns were just on straight talent. Nothing that Zach Wilson did whatsoever either.
New England. Goodness. Let's see. This is one I got to kind of think about. I hate saying Zach Moss over Garrett Wilson just because it doesn't sound right. But you're talking about Zach Moss, who got 100% or whatever the touch is, and is likely to see 15 plus touches against Baltimore. Baltimore's tough to run on. I just wanted to pull up the Patriots defensive knowledge seeker report just to see how receivers have done against them so far. And Tyreek had 5 for 40 and touchdown. Waddle had 4 for 86. Devonta 7 for 47 and a touchdown. AJ Brown 7 for 79. So it doesn't look like a bad matchup. They've given up an average of 14 catches for 165 yards and a 1.0 touchdown per game to opposing receiving cores. So there's
those
yards
receivers have significantly better quarterbacks than Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson, arguably the worst starting quarterback.
I don't think it's arguably.
Well, he's got Dobbs out there in Arizona.
I think Josh Dobbs might be better.
Yeah, I think the matchup is pretty good for Garrett Wilson, but the floor for Moss I think is higher. It's a lot higher. I mean, a goose egg is the floor for Garrett Wilson if he doesn't, catch that long touchdown or whatever.
Mixon had 13 PPR points, I think, last week against Baltimore. So, and that was on 17 touches. So if Moss gets something, and that's without scoring a touchdown. So if Moss gets something similar, and we saw Moss actually had a little bit of receiving upside last week too.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe with the fact that Gardner Minshew's playing, not having a quarterback that scrambles and is more likely to dump it off.
Yeah, it played 98% of the snaps, had 4 targets, 4 receptions to go with 18 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown.
We've seen Dobbs be better than Zach, but we haven't seen Zach be better than Zach. Oh my goodness. This will be the last question unless we get a super chat. Should you start Joe Burrow or Baker Mayfield this week? The Joe Burrow stuff is frightening. We haven't really talked about it today, so maybe we can just discuss it real quick as we kind of end off here. What are you doing with Joe Burrow and the fact that they play Monday night, and Burrow's comment on if he's playing was what? We'll see. Something along those lines of
yeah.
So it's no help whatsoever. So how low are you willing to go down the quarterback totem pole for streamers this week to say, you know what, not messing around with Joe Burrow, I'll take this quarterback? And is Baker one of those quarterbacks?
Well, the interesting thing with Baker is that he also plays on Monday night. We got the dual Monday night games with Eagles at Bucks and Rams at Bengals. So he's like a really good pivot. If Burrow plays, I have a tough time benching him for Baker Mayfield against the Eagles. I can see the justification for it, but it's still Joe Burrow, and just the talent level of the two quarterbacks is so vast, in my opinion. But then if you're talking about like you have a Sunday player and you're like, okay, I don't know if Burrow's going to play. He's like questionable. Excuse me. Then you gotta take the points, and he might play bad too. Like you might just he might play and then not do well.
Bad
like,
the past couple of weeks. So.
Yeah. So, totally understandable though. Like if you wanted to go Baker, given that, let's say you knew Burrow was going to play, you still go Baker because at least he's healthy. At least, the Eagles are a pass funnel. He's been hot, relatively hot. You could certainly make that case. I think from a Sunday question, it's like, how certain am I Burrow is going to play? I guess you could I have him at 14. That's like the lowest I've ranked Joe Burrow in years. Because of the injury, and we just don't know what's going on. The total's not very high. His expected points for the Bengals is not very high. So there is. It's not like it's sacrilege to bench Burrow at this point, given what's going on, especially with the Monday night kickoff.
Right. Like I'm looking at who the 1:00 games are on Sunday, and you got some interesting choices like Russell Wilson, Mac Jones, Derek Carr, and Jordan Love. These are guys that you could potentially have on your waiver wire if you're streaming that are all, I think, decent options to start over Joe Burrow if you just want to not mess with that and just have a guy start Sunday for you. So then you don't have to pick up Jake Browning or something.
I would say that the chances, and how are you feeling about it, but the chances of a monster Burrow game are pretty slim.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we're getting 250 and 2, but you could get that out of a lot of quarterbacks.
Right.
And he's not going to run much, I don't think, with this calf injury. So I would not bench him out of fear. You know how you have that feeling sometimes you're like, oh, I can't bench my stud. I don't think this is a case for that because number one, we're not even sure he's going to play, and if he does play, how healthy is he? I mean, their season is on the brink right now. I mean, they're 0-2. If he sits and they lose a couple more games, they're going to have a tough time coming back from 0-4 or 0-5 or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a decent number of quarterbacks that I'm willing to start over Joe Burrow, and I think Baker is one of them. But that might be an easy decision for you Monday night, like you said.
And if you're a 444 subscriber, I will try to as we know more about Burrow on Saturday, like try to put him down the rankings to the point where I would start starting people over him. I might rank him in the 20s if I'm not sure he's going to play this week. So
there you go. We did get a super chat at the buzzer. Jeff traded away Bryce, Mingo, and Freiermuth and Gabe Davis for Quentin Johnston, Jordan Love, 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. This is in a dynasty league. 12-team super flex, tight end premium as well. So that boosts up Bryce and Jordan Love a little bit, boosts up Freiermuth a little bit. Just trying to break down what this is. Man, there's a lot of moving parts in this.
Yeah, there is.
So I'm trying to simplify this in my head. I would take Bryce over Jordan Love in Dynasty. I would take Quentin Johnston over Mingo and Gabe Davis in Dynasty.
The two of them?
Both of them, yes, together. Although I did kind of stutter when I was thinking about that. So that shows any indication of how I feel. It's not the strongest. But I would take Muth over the seconds, thirds, and fourths in a tight end premium. So I think I take the side you traded away, unfortunately. Because there's just not there's oh my goodness, this is a tough trade. So I'm just trying to read it line for line, and it's hard. I get why you would move away from Bryce and Love, and then you get from Bryce to Love and Mingo and Gabe Davis, you move over to Quentin Johnston, who's a first-round talent but hasn't really done anything.
Yeah, he's still fourth in the depth chart.
He ran like 9 routes on Sunday?
Yeah,
that's not good. I'm taking Bryce and Muth and Gabe Davis. I don't really care about Mingo. He's a fine upside asset to see if he ever does anything. He says he doesn't like Bryce and he loves Love.
Well, that's the important thing.
That's
you gotta like your players. So I don't know that. I mean, Bryce certainly came out of college as a better prospect than Jordan Love, but Jordan Love is like how long before this Carolina offense is like functional, where you can like start him?
2024.
So like, Love's been set up for success. He's the number 2 fantasy quarterback right now through 2 weeks. I know there's
how sustainable is that?
He's got the 11%. I'm sure he's going to have a career 11% touchdown percentage. I'm sure that would be great.
Career on 55% completion percentage.
Well, the other thing is he hasn't had his number 1 weapon.
Yeah, that's also true.
And this whole crew is only going to get better. I mean,
yeah, they're
Christian
all
Watson, Jaden Reed, they're all 20, 22, 23. So I think the future is bright in Green Bay. But I'm also a Packer fan, so not objective, completely objective.
This is such a tough trade, Jeff. I'm sorry, I can't really like just sit down and like analyze this because there's just so much going on, and a lot of players that I don't necessarily like. So it's weird for me. But I will say that if you love this deal, then that's the best deal for you. That's the side that you should actually take. Because I do think that this is pretty close. Like if you threw this out on Twitter, this is going to be like 55-45. And people are going to be debating in the comments about which player is better, which side is better. You're going to get some people that are saying that it's the Jordan Love side easily. Some people say it's the Bryce Young easily. And those are sometimes the best trades to make.
He got 6 picks too.
Yeah. Although a few of them are probably meaningless, but the 2 seconds are nice.
Depends how good of a drafter he is.
That's true. That is true. But yeah. All righty, John. Another Friday in the books. We appreciate everybody for hopping on and joining us for the past hour and 20 minutes. And if you have any more questions about waiver wires, you can drop them down in the comments. If it's on the DLF side, then I'll answer. If it's on the 4for4 side, Sal or John or somebody else will be able to answer those as well too. Get you guys some help with some of your start sit questions. But we appreciate everybody hanging out for the past hour and 20 minutes, like I said, and we hope that you guys have a fantastic weekend. Hope you win all of your matchups, and yeah, that's it. Anything else, John? You good?
I just saw one more question. Anthony Majika asked, trade Ford for Puka. He needs a running back. I think I would make that trade. Trade Ford away for
this one?
For Puka. What do you think?
Puka. I want Puka.
Yeah.
If you need a running back, you should be able to get way more for Puka than Jerome Ford.
Especially if it's PPR.
Yeah, holy crap. The way the Puka trades that I've seen the past week or two. Oh my goodness.
What's his role when Cup comes back?
Robert Woods. That's kind of how I viewed it, essentially.
7 to 10 targets, right? 7 to 10. He's
a 50% hit in production. Yep.
And then and then Tutu's, going from 7 to 8 targets down to 4 or 5. Something like that.
Tutu takes the biggest hit, but I think now we operate in a similar Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods dynamic between the two of them. Because Stafford wants to throw the ball to Puka. So that's not just going to go away just because he gets somebody he wants to throw the ball a little bit more to comes back,
Right.
I'll take Puka in this. And if you need a running back, you can trade Puka for a much better running back. Like Josh Jacobs or Derrick Henry or somebody. I've seen there's some wild Puka trades out there.
There was a bonus question for you.
Nice. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Have a great weekend. Good luck on your matchups this week. Like I said, drop a comment if you have more questions or need more help. But we will see you guys next week for week 4. Later.